Hi, I'm Jen Straight with Complete Payroll.
And it's Emily Martin from Ally HR Partners.
Welcome back. It's been a while. We had the holidays and all that
snowstorms.
So we got delayed a little bit, but welcome back. Thank you for visiting us. We are at Lloyd Taco Factory on Hurdle. This is a perfect spot, and I hate to admit that it's only my second time, and I'm a Buffalonian.
Yeah. Jen had Lloyd the first time 2 weeks ago, which
I'm
is
very
incredible.
embarrassed to say that. But my experience was great, so I'll definitely be here for more beverages and
yeah, we gotta come back when the bar's open next time.
That's right. Well, maybe we can sneak a little something.
Yeah, there's some bottles back there.
Our videos always include talking about drinks. There's more to us than just drinks, but when we get together, we like to.
You're stressed about this stuff. We're stressed about this stuff.
That's true. You might need a beverage for this one. Today, we're going to talk about 5 things that employers need to know about leaves. We had a video previously that we talked about some leaves, but I think the questions keep coming about it. It's a new year. New regulations are being set out, so we're going to help you kind of navigate through this. We'll also have, it's a lot to know and a lot to listen to as we're just talking about it. So we're going to have resources and graphics for you to refer to. Mm-hmm. Emily has a great chart on her website that is just perfectly, it lays out everything. So we'll definitely link that to the video as well. But we'll talk about it if you want to listen.
So basically, this video will be a PSA almost of, if you don't know about the leaves that you're required to provide or how to manage or administer them, these are some 5 high-level takeaways of really things that you need to think about and do and what you need to know.
Sounds good.
And like Jen said, there's other resources on my website. There's a webinar that we just did that gets way more in depth, so you can check that out too. But
and not to say any of this won't change, because things keep changing as we go, and which is why it's so important to just have that knowledge and stay in communication with both Emily and I, so we can let you know if there are any changes to this, because it's a lot. You're trying to run your business, and we just want to help you navigate through all of these changes. And but you got to know what you got to know. So let's dive into it.
All right. So like you just said, Jen, number 1, the first thing you should know is you should know what leaves you are required to provide, right? So dependent on mostly your employer size, you may have different requirements, but generally in New York State, they're pretty universal. So that chart that you mentioned on my website breaks it all down, but the biggies are really FMLA. That's if you have 50 or more employees. That's a federal leave that's been around a long time, 12 weeks, job protected. Then of course there's your disability leave, which is all New York State employers are required to have disability policy if someone gets hurt outside of work or sick. You have workers' comp. And of course, paid family leave is a big one, a newer one now. That's 12 weeks of paid leave through New York State for child bonding and caring for a family member and things. So if you don't know and you're not aware of what you're required to provide, that's the first step, is to make sure that you do, so you can offer it to your employees when they qualify, because you are required to do that.
And the paid family leave is a good example of, it was a ramp-up period. So if you feel like you know something about paid family leave because you had an instance last year, or the year before, make sure that you're updated with it, because it was a ramp-up period that started in 2018. I know, because it started at the perfect time when I had my baby.
Very good.
But it has been a ramp-up period, so there are now there's more time. There's up to 12 weeks given, and it's up to 67% of your pay, when before it was less than that.
Yep. Yeah, and there were a couple changes this year. They increased the number of days from 60 days if you take it by day instead of by week, to a normal work week if someone works 6 or 7 days a week. And then it's going to apply to care for siblings next year as well. So that's a good point. These laws continue to develop and change. New York State loves keeping us on our toes, so stay updated.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Number 2, so not only should you know what leaves you're required to provide, you also need to know what the rules are and the obligations are for providing those leaves and how to administer them. So really this includes things like you cannot retaliate against employees for requesting or taking these leaves. New York State loves to throw that retaliation provision into all laws, so make sure you understand that. So you shouldn't be taking any negative consequences against employees for taking or requesting leaves.
Can we just stop there for a second? What are some examples of that? Because I think an obvious one would be saying something to somebody that, or making, comments of those things. Because, I guess back in the day when I was 16, it would even be hard taking a sick day. I'm calling in sick or something like that. And you would hear things from bosses. Now the retaliation can be many things. What are some examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the bar for retaliation keeps getting lower and lower. So it can be just a snide, sarcastic comment by a supervisor or something that then the employee perceives as overall disliked by that supervisor, and now they, claim a lot of things are happening negatively against them. They're getting put on different shifts, less desirable shifts, that kind of stuff. So be careful with that retaliation and make sure your managers know what the rules are too, not just you as a business owner or the person running the business, because their actions are your actions, like we've talked about in other webinars.
Right. I think you want to keep it as consistent as before the leave as after the leave. So schedules and things sometimes do change, but you need to make that clear to the employees so they don't feel that way.
Right, exactly. So some other rules just to be aware of, there are certain notice periods. So if someone requests leave, you have to give them a certain amount of days to get the paperwork back. Usually it's 15 is a good rule of thumb. That's the FMLA requirement. And then even if they don't return the paperwork in that time, you really should extend at least one more time, a 7-day period. So know that there are certain requirements there. You can't deny leave if someone doesn't return the paperwork in an arbitrary amount of days, that you set. Also, job protection. A lot of these leaves, most of them have a job protection provision, which means that you can't replace the employee permanently while they're out, and you must have the job available for them or an equivalent job available for them when they come back. So definitely don't fire anybody when they're on leave or when they come back. That job protection is there for a reason. So again, the takeaway for number 2 is really just to make sure you know what the rules are. There's certainly more than what we just talked about. Check out that webinar and reach out if you have any questions about that.
I think a good idea is having that, like the email paper trail, electronic trail of requesting that information at least from the employee so they can't say they never got it. I get it. Some employees don't use their email or say they never got it. There should be some sort of just documentation of the request, so it's not like I asked you and that those things happen, right? There's miscommunication. Yeah. Those things should be documented.
Documentation is key for everything HR related or payroll related, but definitely here too. And that actually takes us into number 3, Jen, which is knowing what paperwork you need to provide and send. All these leaves have different paperwork that are required for employees to apply and then for you to submit to whoever the carrier is for that leave, where they then make a determination if the employee is eligible and how much benefits they'll get. So you can find usually the paperwork from your carrier. So your disability carrier is the same as your paid family leave carrier. You can request paperwork from them. They'll send it to you. You can also Google a lot of this stuff and find it on New York State's website and things, but make sure you know what paperwork is required. There's also certain notices of employee rights to take this leave that you have to give when you give the paperwork. So make sure that you have all those ducks in a row. And then something I do with my clients is I provide a great letter template that kind of goes with all the paperwork and sums everything up in terms of expectations for returning paperwork, dates to do that by, other responsibilities employees have while on leave, like paying benefit premiums and that kind of stuff.
That would be very useful to have just for the business owner so they can kind of keep track. And in each situation, that was close. There's different instances where the employer initiates the paperwork or the employee initiates the paperwork and kind of how it has to go back and forth. So it's very important to look at that kind of chart to know what order goes in what for each leave.
That's a good point too. So employees can get this paperwork themselves, and in some cases, like the PFL paperwork, it does suggest the employee can submit that themselves to the carrier, but definitely best practices have it all go through you as the employer, because if there's mistakes on the paperwork and missing information, that's going to delay the whole process. So if it filters through you and you're doing an initial pass before you send it to the carrier, this process is just going to go a lot more smoothly. So make sure you're giving the employee the paperwork, they're getting it back to you, and then you're submitting it to the carrier.
Right. And documenting the submission.
Yes. If you send it via email, send it with a read receipt, with an open receipt. If you send it via mail, I don't know who's doing that nowadays, but some people are. Send it certified mail. It's worth a little bit of money that costs, because, again, if you ever have to defend yourself on whether you offered people this leave in the future or whether you gave a certain amount of time for them to return it, you want to make sure to have that documented.
Absolutely. And we're not trying to create more work for you or stress you out. It's protecting you.
Yeah.
Everything that we talk about is protecting your business and what you've worked so hard for. And these are just little things that can save you a lot of time in the long run.
Yeah.
And money.
All right, number 4. So number 4 is kind of a big encompassing thing you need to know, but you really need to know how you're going to handle these leaves. So we've told you up to this point the things that you really have to do or should do in terms of obligations, but there are certain, I guess, liberties you have or decisions you have to make about provisions on how you manage these leaves or administer them. So if you don't have policies or procedures or processes in place now that make it so you have a consistent process to treat every employee the same, as you mentioned, Jen, consistency is key. Define those now. So these are things like if there are situations where employees can overlap leaves, so FMLA usually applies in all the situations that PFL applies or disability. You want to clearly define up front if you're going to require people to overlap leaves, right? That's just one example. Also, if employees owe benefit premiums while they're out on leave, how are they going to pay that? These are all questions you want to ask yourself and document up front so you make sure every single leave you handle consistently so there's no claims of discrimination or something like that later.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there any guideline of, that's a good point, and I haven't thought about that. If they're on leave, how are they paying for their benefits? So how?
Yeah, this is a great example of one little thing that a lot of companies don't think of, and maybe they never think of it, and you don't realize you just ate the entire benefit premium, cost for that entire time the employee was on leave, which can be a lot of money if someone's on like a family plan or something, right? So you should clearly communicate in that cover letter I mentioned to employees that they will still be responsible for that premium while they're out, and make arrangements for how they can pay for that, whether they send you a check each month or have to pay it out of their checks when they come back in an increased amount. But yeah, these are all things that you need to consider.
And that's good to know that the employer is not required to cover that cost when they're out.
You still have to cover the amount you normally would cover when they're working for you, but not the employee's amount. Yeah. And more details on things that you should consider in that webinar we did as well, so check that out. All right, number 5. Number 5 is easy and simple, but you need to know when you need help. So, if nothing else, if you take away nothing else from this PSA video, it's that this is super important. There are like huge consequences to potentially mishandling leaves. So if you're uncertain at all about whether someone's eligible, whether you can let someone go, if they've exhausted their leave, whatever it might be, ask questions and reach out for help, whether that's Jen or myself. Your insurance carrier, right? Your disability carrier. You could consult a lawyer, but you're going to pay like 5 times the cost.
Right.
But ask somebody, because it's way better to proceed with caution than to, be sorry later and have to defend a claim.
Absolutely. And some things, especially now, are just not so black and white.
Yeah.
There's a lot of gray areas, why it's so great to have someone like Emily who can look at your specific situation and the employee's specific situation, because you might not find that answer on Google. I mean, there's a lot of specifics that you need to know, and you need that guidance.
Yeah, that's a good point. None of this leave stuff is black and white. There's other layers of things that apply here, so every situation is different, so certainly you want to investigate every situation before taking action.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Jen, so those are the 5 things.
Those are the 5 things. Now, we went through them very quickly, but we're going to have references on this video and links below. The chart is super helpful that Emily has on her website, so we'll link that right up. Print it out, and use it, because that's a great just reference point of what when you need what paperwork and everything. You also had a webinar yesterday that talked about this.
That's posted up on my website as well. Yep. So you can check
and we'll link that out. This is a lot of information, and it's constantly changing. Some things like the FMLA, some things are not changing, but again, everything is unique. Sometimes it goes down to how many employees you have, what's the normal work week. There's a lot of varying. It's early, so I'm like a little not using the right words. But there's a lot of those situations that are unique. So it's important to reach out to us. So
and we'll be here.
Yeah, so we hope we didn't overwhelm you, but we want to thank Lloyd at Taco Factory for hosting us, and we hope to see you here on Taco Tuesday and Taco Wednesday and Taco Thursday and the rest of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no bad day for a taco.
There's no bad day for tacos or margaritas. There we go, back to the drinks.
All right, we'll catch you guys next time.
All right, thank you so much.